Welcome to Just Roots Kitchen Intuition Workshop. Today we have a recipe featuring a Spanish tortilla, and we're using local shiitake mushrooms and some local greens in that tortilla and some local chorizo. So it's going to be really yummy. A Spanish tortilla is not like a masa harina kind of tortilla. It's actually it's a potato and egg dish. So hence, we've got some local eggs. This recipe is we'll make it through really quick. It's not super difficult, but it is a great one to have in your back pocket so that you can take the main idea of the potatoes and eggs and try out so many different variations using different vegetables, sauces, or flavorings and spices. It's like kind of a go-to for me now. I've only made it once, but I'm like, wow, this is wonderful, and I want to do it all the time. It's pretty simple. So let's go through what supplies we're going to be using to make this dish. I'm using a cast iron pan, and it's a pretty big one. So this is going to host my tortilla in it when it's all done. So think about all the 2 pounds of potatoes and your vegetables are all going to need to fit in it. You don't quite need it this big. This would make a thinner tortilla because it's so wide. You could really do it in a pan that's this big. And I like to use cast irons. You could use a nonstick pan if you'd like. I just sometimes finish my tortilla in the oven on broil, so I want to make sure I'm using an oven-safe pan. But you can always flip it instead of broil it, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Another thing you could do if you're not going to use an oven-safe pan, you're not going to stick it in the broiler to cook the top of the tortilla, is you can basically, I just have a cutting board under here, and I wrapped it in a little bit of tin foil. You can use a square one too, as long as it's a little bit bigger than the tortilla itself. And basically you can flip it onto here, and then that way you can push it back onto the pan and cook the other side. So there's two options, and we'll get to those when we get to them. Some other things that you're gonna have, I'm using a whisk or a fork for scrambling our eggs and a little bowl for that. Then I've got a bowl for my vegetables. You could really put them right into whatever pan you're going to be cooking them in, but it is going to be a separate pan at first from what we're going to be cooking the potatoes in. We'll throw everything and fold it in together later, but you're going to want 2 pans to start. And this, if it's convenient for you. Just a chef's knife, or really any kind of knife you have. I just have this one out. Some measuring spoons for your spices, salt and pepper. A potato peeler. It's optional to peel your potatoes. You don't have to, but you may want to. And then if you have a mandolin, you could use that to get really thin slices on your potato. We're going to be hand cutting in class, so do what you'd like. A measuring cup that gets as little as a half cup for our olive oil. I'm using scissors to open my chorizo. And speaking of the chorizo, so we had a bit of an ordering mix up. So we did get lovely local chorizo, but this is dry cured sausage. We're still going to use it similarly to how we used it before. We're going to cut it up into small pieces and sort of warm it and stir fry it so it's a little bit softer. But we had initially planned to have chorizo that was ground and raw. So the recipe is going to be a little bit different from what we have on our recipe sheet. And so just follow along. It's going to be pretty easy. You can also choose not to use this at all, or you can at the very end just slice it up and serve it with your tortilla. I'm using 6 eggs. The whole package of shiitake mushrooms. We are going to cut the ends off. We had some pretty big onions in this DIY kit, so I'm just going to use one of them. Use the other one for whatever you like. Maybe make some pickled onions. 2 pounds roughly of potatoes. Doesn't have to be perfect. Salt and pepper, and then a couple spices. So you either have like a smoked hot paprika blend, or you have a mix of sweet paprika with cayenne. So they're going to be similar. You might want to taste it. see how hot it is and see how much you'd like to put in. I don't like to tell people how spicy to make things because everyone has different tastes. We'll also be using about a 1/4 teaspoon of thyme. And if you'd like, if you have oregano at home, sometimes I use that. No need though. Some baby greens. We're gonna roughly chop these into about 2 cups, so you'll have some left over for sure. And then some olive oil. And then I think that's it. So let's get started. First things first is we're gonna get these potatoes cooking. So you have the option to peel them or leave them whole. And that's totally up to you. I'm gonna peel them pretty quick. And I don't super worry if I leave some of the skin on or whatever because it doesn't make a huge difference to me. So basically we're freeing the potato from the skins and getting ready to slice it as thin as we can. One thing to note is it is a little bit easier to get thin slices on the potato when the skin is on because it's like a rough point that it hits the cutting board and makes it a little bit easier to slice super thin, but whichever way, it only takes a minute to do this. If you don't have a potato or a vegetable peeler like this, you can also use a paring knife and just be really slow and careful when you do it if you're not used to paring quickly. But you'll probably just want to do the same action. You can come towards yourself or away from yourself, sort of just like this with a paring knife. And if you spot any eyes, go ahead and cut those out. The way that I like to store potatoes at my house so that they don't start sprouting. I keep them dry as much as possible so they're not damp because damp makes them want to sprout. So I make sure they're in a dry spot of my house, but I also don't expose them to light. So I'll put like a little piece of thin cloth over them or put them in a paper bag that's open on top. And that tends to help me keep them from sprouting. I have a very light-filled kitchen, so I have to consider storing them. But I've found when I put them in a pantry, they go bad faster. And I think it has to do with that air circulation. So that's my little potato trick. And if we have any avid gardeners in this class, now is a great time to get your potatoes planted. You can do fingerlings or big potato varieties like these. And if anyone's ever curious about how to do that, you can certainly reach out to us because it's a fun process. And you really, just buying some seed potatoes, you get so many amazing potatoes from them. So yeah, you can even do them in pots or old feed sacks filled with soil on a porch if you don't have a backyard. All right, so I got my potatoes peeled and it's slippery and I don't need my peeler anymore. And so just to make this easier to make my thin slices, I'm going to cut the potato in half. And that gives me a nice surface to rest it on. And then I'm going to just slice them as thin as I can. Now this part is so up to you because you can make them thicker or thinner than this. I would actually try for a little bit thinner. But if it's thicker, it's going to take a longer time to cook. If it's thinner, it'll cook faster. So just keep that in mind. If you're not in a rush, maybe you do thicker. But if you use a mandolin, which is a cooking tool that helps slice things very thinly, you can get them really small. Now you don't want them to burn or anything, so I'd say I like to aim for 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. So this part might take a few minutes. And if anybody needs me to hold up the size of mine again, I will. But again, oops, it's just going to take a little bit longer to cook them if they're thicker. I just tend to like thin. I like the way that they like when they've been cooking in olive oil, they kind of stack and get stuck on each other and become this beautiful dense thing. And this is why I use a bowl. I like to clear my cutting station. This is the workout part of this cooking workshop. The trick here is to try to get, it doesn't matter how thick you want them, but try to get them even so that your potato is cooked evenly. That's important. And folks, if you're still chopping your potatoes, or if anybody's ahead of us, you can start heating up a pan. You can get it going on medium for now, just to get it nice and warm. And we're gonna drop in quite a bit of olive oil. About 4 tablespoons to start, and we'll probably even use more. This dish does use a lot of olive oil, but I don't want that to scare you. I think olive oil is very healthy for you. It's a good fat. Just getting finished up here. One more for me. And I'm sure if you're like me, your wrist is already tired. Now's the time that you'd be more likely to cut yourself, so stay vigilant. This is why I like having these big knives, so you can kind of scoop everything off the cutting board at once. So it's a Christmas present from my brother-in-law, and it was a lovely one. And I'm just going to hold these up just so folks can see they're evenly cut, about between a quarter and an 1/8 inch. And they're kind of big slices, I just took my potatoes, cut them in half, laid them down, and then did my slices. They're not quartered or anything like that. Okay. That's a lot of potato, 2 whole pounds. I'm gonna wipe off my station because I've got potato all over. And I'm gonna use the same cutting board for my other vegetables. And one that fell. All right, so our pan should be heating up. And what we're gonna go ahead and do is put in about 4 tablespoons to start of olive oil. So, and we'll keep it on medium low. So we're gonna get the potatoes cooking, but we don't want to burn them. We want them nice and soft. And we're going to stir them from time to time. So we don't want them sticking to the bottom. That's why stirring helps. If they do start sticking to the bottom, oops, wrong olive oil. If they do start sticking to the bottom, then you're going to want to add more olive oil. So don't be afraid to do that. I'm just using regular olive oil. A lot of recipes suggest using extra virgin olive oil, but I think both Irene and I have tried it both ways, and it's delicious both ways. So I'm using the larger of my pans, and I'm going to start with 4 tablespoons of olive oil. And basically that should coat the whole bottom of your pan. And if you have a little bit bigger pan, you might want to put a tiny dash more so it's evenly coated on the bottom. All right, and then we're going to move that to medium low heat. Medium low is best. And drop in your potatoes. And we'll get those starting to cook and make sure that we return to them so that we can stir them and keep them from sticking. Okay, so normally in the recipe, at this point, we'd be cooking the raw chorizo, but because this is already cooked, what we're gonna do is cook our mushrooms first and our onion, mushroom and onion first, and then we're gonna add some sliced up raw chorizo. So feel free, if you have scissors, that's probably the best way to cut that open, but we don't need it this second. I'm gonna start with an onion. You can use as much onion as you'd like. So this is not a recipe that's like very precise like baking. This is just like, what do you like? Go ahead and put that in. If you're not huge on onion, just use a little bit of onion for flavor. If you could eat a latke made of onions, then use the whole thing or find yourself somewhere in the middle. But these are big onions. And generally, this is what I would use, this size for this much potato. And then also keep in mind, if your pan isn't quite as big, if you don't have a huge pan at home, you probably shouldn't use too much of this because we need to fit everything in there, right? Yeah, so go ahead and peel your onion. And we are going to slice the onion in thin slices as well. So just getting off the hard edge, leaving the onion mostly intact. And it doesn't really matter which way you slice it. You can slice your thin slices with the butt of the onion or lengthwise. No matter, no difference, but thin does matter. So I'm going pretty thin on these, like closer to 1/8 of an inch. Really want those to cook through and almost like caramelize as they're cooking. So and try your best to keep it even throughout your cut. Okay, discard the ends. I'm gonna go ahead and stick that in a bowl before I start cooking it. Don't forget to stir your potatoes once your pan comes to heat. Mine's definitely not there because I have a electric stove, which things tend to cook a little bit slower at first. I experimented with a gas stove this weekend and just remembered how different they are. So sometimes in this class, I've noticed like I'll share to put something on medium when I put it on high. So just keep that in mind. Differences of stoves. Go ahead and slicing up my other half. Somehow I've avoided frying, but I think it's coming soon. Yeah. Whoa, all good. So that's our onion. And you can go ahead and put in a couple tablespoons of olive oil in your other pan, and you're going to drop your onions in there while we cut up the mushrooms. So I'd say because we don't have the chorizo, I do like 2 tablespoons to make sure it has enough lubrication to fry and not burn. And that's going to go on medium heat as well. You can rinse your mushrooms in a colander. These are certified organic mushrooms. They don't have visible dirt on them to me, so I'm not going to rinse mine. I do rinse mushrooms from the store, especially if they're not organic, and they're often covered in dirt because they're grown. Most mushrooms are grown commercially in dirt. So these mushrooms If you notice when you feel them, the cap is really soft and the stem is really hard. So sometimes when I cook them, I cook the stems first because I want to use all of them because they taste delicious. And then I put the caps in. In this circumstance, you may wish to cut your stems off just because they're more woody and fibrous, and not include those because this is a pretty quick cook. If you don't mind it being a little bit chewy, you can certainly leave it on. And you can cut the mushrooms pretty much however you'd like. I'm just cutting them into strips and just making sure it's even so that my cooking is even. And so don't forget, you can certainly opt out of using the stems, just cut those off, or you can leave them on. And this isn't the case with all mushrooms, it's just, I've noticed shiitakes have tough stems. We're starting to hear some sizzling action. And with our greens today, we're just going to be doing a very light cook of the greens. So you can either add them once our onions and mushrooms are done cooking. You can even turn the heat off when you do it, or you can add them at the end when we fold in just before we fold in the egg into the potato mixture. You can also dice your mushrooms if you want them more evenly throughout. Use a wooden spoon, make sure, and it's totally fine if you use the same spoon on the potatoes and the onions and stuff. It's all going in the same place and there's no raw meat being handled. All right, so now's a great time to give your potatoes a big stir. And you're wanting to break up a lot of the like sort of clods, how the potato gets stacked. There are recipes for tortas that use, a cup or more of extra virgin olive oil for the recipe. This one is using a lot less. I think that we said about a half cup altogether. So just keep in mind, you do have more olive oil to work with if you do start getting some sticking. This is kind of what makes this dish so decadent. In just a minute, we'll add our mushrooms in with those onions. They're gonna start to turn translucent soon. And feel free to go ahead and get out your chorizo. If you're going to do it this way, I'm gonna just talk through really quick my ideas about this. So if I had ground chorizo, I would start it by cooking it fully in a pan, kind of on low heat, so that I render some of those juices. And then I would add in my onions and then my mushrooms. In this case, we're using a cured sort of, what you would have almost like a pepperoni. So the meat is a little bit tougher. It's fully cooked or cured. So really what we're going to do is just break it into small pieces and mix it in to soften it with heat with our mushrooms and onions. Another alternative is you can leave it out, or at the very end, you can just slice it nice and thin and serve it on the side with the torta. Or you can put it on top and broil it. Whatever you'd like to do, this is what I'm going to choose to do for today. Make sure to keep stirring. Some sticking is going to be inevitable, and that's okay, but don't forget, you can always add more oil. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add my mushrooms. Get those cooking while I chop up the chorizo. So sometimes the end has like, oh no, this one doesn't. Never mind, a little like skin or casing that you can cut off. So I'm gonna cut these pretty thin. Sort of just like I was my potatoes. And I do encourage you to taste it. See how spicy it is. See how salty it is. And keep that in mind when you're adding it. This recipe doesn't have a perfect amount of salt for you to use because that's up to you. Some people can't use salt in very high amounts because of dietary issues. And we're already going to be putting in something that's really salty here. So I want people to use your intuition about how much salt you'd like to use. So I have about half of it cut right now into little slices. You could leave it that way, or you could cut them up even smaller. It is so delicious. I've never had this one before. Wow. So I just stacked them and then sliced them in half again. And I'm just kind of dicing them up so that we can mix them evenly. So right there is about half of my sausage, and I think that's all I'm going to use today. You can use the whole thing if you really want to, but I want to balance the flavors really well, and it's powerful. And the rest can be for a snack some other time. All right, let's take a minute to stir. So your onions are getting soft, your mushrooms are getting soft, your potatoes are getting cooked. Make sure you're flipping from the bottom. So flipping them to make sure the potatoes on the top are getting a chance to get some contact with the bottom of the pan and some steaming effect from the potatoes around them. This is the tricky part, is keeping them all in. Why having a nice big pan is helpful. So we're gonna cook these for about 15 minutes. You can set a timer or you can just use your intuition of when they feel like they're getting cooked. And really we want them to be pretty much softened and ready to go before we add our egg. The egg is just kind of the final piece that brings it all together. So we're not really looking for that time to be for cooking the potatoes. I'm gonna go ahead and add another tablespoon or so to the middle of my pan. I'm getting a little bit of sticking. Don't be afraid to do it. You could also cook this with whatever, if you decide to try the dish with ground beef or chorizo that's not cured next time, you could use some of the fat rendered to cook this as well. That would be delicious. Starting to smell so good. And so, yeah, I pretty much want my onions all the way cooked, my mushrooms all the way cooked, and I still haven't put in my chorizo. Now is seasoning time. So I'm going to start by seasoning my onions and mushrooms. I'm going to use some black pepper. You can do that to taste. Let me see what I'm going to start with, a 4th teaspoon. And just because I love pepper, I'm doing about a half a half teaspoon of pepper, but you don't need to do that. A 4th should be fine, or an 1/8, or just a grind or two. And feel free to use, if you don't want hot, if you have smoked paprika at home that's sweet, you can use that, or you can use hot paprika. If the sausage feels spicy to you, you might want to use just a pinch. If you're like, bring it on, use a 4th teaspoon. But just imagine that it's similar to cayenne. And feel free to experiment with some other spices that you think go well with Spanish cooking. You're totally welcome to do that. I'm gonna pull up the chat because it's not up on mine and I think I'm missing some stuff. Let's see. Renee, did I miss anything in the chat? Any questions? I don't think so.
No, Brooke, it's all good.
Thank you. Okay. And then you'll want to use about a 1/4 teaspoon of thyme. Again, no problem if you want to use a little bit more. And I'm just adding those spices directly to my onions and my mushrooms. Thyme is such an elegant spice and it goes so well in this simple dish. It's amazing. And now we're getting the amazing fragrance of the paprika heating up and all the time. And I would move it to low heat at this point. We don't want to burn the spice, but we do want to heat it up to release its flavor. Man, I'm dropping everything today. And then I'm going to add in my chorizo. So I did about half of the chorizo just cut up into little bits. So you can almost imagine this is part of the filling for our potatoes. And I moved it to low heat, and my goal here is just to get my potatoes warmed up. Oh, sorry, I mean my chorizo warmed up. And make sure to stir and spread it around. You don't have to be too constantly hanging over this. I think it is good to let it sit in place for a little. But it is good to continuously flip to keep an eye on it. Next step is we are going to use 6 eggs. We're going to sort of scramble them and just get them ready to go. We don't need them quite this second. And I'm just using my veggie bowl just to save dishes. I'm going to crack open 6 of these. Scramble them and then, oops, and then get ready for, of course I did that. Got it. And then get ready for our greens being folded in as well. Some things I was already thinking about when I was like what I might enjoy my tortilla with is like a garlic aioli. Of course, cheese. You could add cheese into yours and that would be really yummy. I like a sofrito sauce or something like that. Would all be yummy. I also was daydreaming about doing sort of a shrimp version of this. Living in the South made me really fall in love with shrimp in like traditional breakfast dishes or shrimp with eggs. Shrimp with grits. So you might notice that the middle of your pan tends to get a little bit more heat. So try to rotate your potatoes through there if that's the case. So you want to keep them pretty wet the entire time. You want them to be sort of sizzling in olive oil. Not getting too fried. The fry part kind of comes at the very end. I can probably bring the camera over here so you can see mine in a second. I'm going to add a little more olive oil. Excellent. Probably getting close to a 1/2 cup. And gonna do a little, you can use a fork or a whisk just to break up those egg yolks. If you decide to do a really big pan and you've got lots and lots of potatoes, just increase the amount of egg. And in terms of salt, so my suggestion for people is to just use, I use a teaspoon of salt in this dish. That might seem like a lot for you. Maybe you do a half teaspoon or a quarter. That's just what I do when I make this. And I put it into the potatoes. So at some point pretty soon, I'm going to do that. It's going to make the potatoes release even more of their water content. We're going to get that going in a second. So 1/2 to 1 teaspoon of salt. It's a lot of potato. But there is a lot of salt in it anyways with the chorizo sausage because it's salt cured. Right, so my potatoes, if you take your, you know you're getting close if you can use a wooden spoon and cut one of your thickest slices in half. Mine are almost there, but not quite. I'm just getting them pressed in the bottom of the pan here. Get that salt mixed up. So we've got our onions are probably totally cooked. You can go ahead and turn them off heat if they seemed ready to go. I'm going to show you what mine look like right now. They've been on low heat. There's no extra olive oil swimming around. It's just wonderful colors and smells. And then we're going to get our greens ready. Well, we just finished with probably only a minute or so, a couple minutes left on those potatoes. In our green selection here, it appears we have Swiss chard, possibly tiny Swiss chard or beet greens. They kind of look the same. If you taste the stem, they usually have a salty flavor. And then there's some baby spinach in here, it appears as well. So I'm looking for roughly 2 cups. You don't want to overpower it with greens. If you're a greens lover, do what you'd like. Just so you know, some of these spinaches have like really, they're locally grown, but they have pretty thick stems here, which are woody. So I would say if you see a stem that's like pretty big, you might want to just rip those off. For instance, in the chard as well, they both have that a little bit. They're not quite baby greens. You can also leave them on, cook them a little longer, but that would be my suggestion, is just rip off those big stems and then cut. I like ball it up in the cigar method, they call it, where you just loosely grip them and push them together. And then I do sort of bite-sized pieces. So this is about 1 cup. I do 2 cups. It's like 1 and then some change there. Pull out those big stems or any pieces that don't look lovely. I do think the stem holds a lot of the nice flavor. So you bundle it up, cigar method. Give it some rough chopping. You can also just cut up the stems if you have time, really small. That should work. I got a little more than 2 cups. I'm a greens person. All right. So my potatoes are very easily cutting with my wooden spoon. So I'm going to flatten them out as best I can in my pan. Well, before I do that, I'm sorry. I'm going to pour in the onion, chorizo, and mushroom mixture that has our spices in it as well. Give that a stir. Really get everything mixed in. Add your greens. And we're going to let those greens sort of get wilty or cook down for a couple minutes. And then we'll add our egg. This looks so good already. So beautiful, so colorful. I really think some like a creamy sauce would go so well over it, drizzled over the top of a slice of this when it's all done. My goodness. That's so good. Maybe I should bring my camera over if I can. I'm getting a tour. So beautiful colors, if you can see. Potatoes are nice and soft. They cut very easily with a wooden spoon. And we're getting those greens. See how they're already wilting. It's only been a minute. Put you back where you live. Make sure you can see. Great. All right. Greens are almost there. All my ingredients are spread pretty well. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking the back of my spoon and I'm kind of flattening it to the best of my ability. I'm gonna make sure my heat is on medium low. And we're gonna add our egg in here. So I'm just gonna pour it over the top and kind of move. You know what? We're gonna bring the camera back. You can see that. There we go. That looks good. Great. Okay. For ta-ta. So I'm gonna sort of as evenly as I can get it in all the cracks and crevices. I'm on medium heat. And that is just the perfect amount of egg for this torta. Look at that, just perfectly covering. Glorious. All right, so now we're gonna sit and we're gonna let this cook for a little bit, 2 to 3 minutes on this medium heat. Sometimes that might be 5, depending on my stove and your stove. One tip that I encourage you to do, not yet, but pretty soon I'm gonna start using my wooden spoon to sort of push the egg off the sides of the pan. And why we're doing this is because we want it to be easier to flip or to broil. You can just broil. So if you do that, you don't have, you can skip this step. But if you are wanting to do the traditional flip, then I would suggest trying to loosen the sides first. If you're gonna flip, you need to make sure your eggs aren't totally runny because then you're gonna have tortilla all over your kitchen. So you want the egg to be mainly cooked on top, but you just want to get a nice crisp down on the bottom. When you flip it, you might add some butter or some more olive oil to the pan on the bottom so that the new flip side doesn't stick. And then if you prefer, just broil the thing. So broil, stick it in your oven on like 450, 500. And just keep a close eye on it. I don't like to put it right on the top rack because I always burn things when I do that. I turn the oven light on and I keep an eye on it, and it's really quick how it happens. But as soon as you start to see bubbling and browning on the top, you know you're good to go. I would let it rest for like 5 or so minutes so that everything can congeal and solidify, and then you can slice it into beautiful like pieces like quiche when you're ready to eat it. So I'm gonna check and see if my edges are ready to be loosened. They are not. It's a pretty big pie here. Well, I guess I could do it a little bit. some areas more than others. Great, this looks so good. I guess mine was on low heat, not medium low. So it might take me an extra sec to catch up to you. In the meantime, feel free to get your space cleaned up and I'll come back on in just a minute. I'm going to mute so you don't have to hear it. Okay, it's definitely time to start pushing my edges. And I know that no way am I ready to flip this at this point. It's got too much loose stuff on top. You can also cover this to cook it a little bit quicker, but I prefer not to do that. I think it just makes the texture not as lovely. So if you're in a rush, go ahead and cover it. If you've got some spare time, just keep doing what I'm doing. And then just get to relax and or clean up, whatever you like while you wait. Wow, it's starting to look amazing. So you know you're doing a good job peeling the sides up. If you're getting olive oil bubbling along the edges, that's a good sign. I'm gonna bring the camera over for a minute so people can see. If you really want to do the foolproof thing, you don't have to do the flip. You can certainly just stick it in that broil. So can we get a good look at that? Yeah.
Also to be considered that if you're gonna do the flip and you're using a cast iron, it's gonna be very heavy.
Very heavy, yeah.
I'm saying that because my own experience. I always do the flip, and the first few times I did it with the cast iron, it wasn't fun. So just maybe think about a lighter, non-stick pan for the future.
That is a great suggestion. Yeah. When I was getting set up, I was thinking about that, but I forgot to say it. But yeah, there are benefits to the large cast irons. They're amazing, but they're also very heavy. I'm curious to try one of my. You're welcome to taste it and see if you want to add a little salt or pepper once your eggs are fully cooked. Mine, I'm getting pretty close to there. I like to do that as a test. Is it running too much? A little bit, so I'm going to leave it cook. And I'm even considering, because we've got so much yummy good stuff in here, I'm considering doing mine on broil. So I think I'm going to set my oven to broil. Just, I mean, I could flip it, but I don't know if I think I want it perfect. Can you see me here? Does anyone, before we are all signed off for the evening, because it's 5:53, does anyone have any questions? I'm sure you probably would have asked them by now, but or if you want to share any ideas you have for making a different style tortilla with different filling and flavors, just go ahead and chime in if you'd like to, no pressure.
I want to share one of the traditional ways. There that people like to eat the tortilla in Spain is, and I am one of them, they leave the egg very, very runny. So they only cook like 1 minute each side, and there's like a whole group of people who are devoted to that style where you open the tortilla and it just like the eggs runs.
Oh,
Um, something that is something that if you like, you need to also plan to like eat it right away. It's not for like keeping for later, but it's delicious too.
yeah. Folks, I'm finding that with all of our wonderful greens and chorizo and onions and mushrooms added to this recipe, it probably would do better in the oven on broil than to flip it yourself. But if you're feeling brave, go for it. But I think I'm gonna do mine on broil for just a minute or two. I do feel like it's at the point where the bottom should be cooked through. It's kind of holding together against the sides of the pan. And so I'm ready. And I'm going to turn on my oven light so I don't forget about it because gosh, how many times I've done that. That way I can get a nice look. I hope I have enough time to be able to pull it out. The very end. So this is just such a quick, well, it's not that quick. It's an hour to make this meal, but from start to finish, less than an hour. And it's just such a full, rich, nourishing dish that could be substituted with so many different things. So I hope if you haven't cooked them before, it's part of your repertoire. It's like now, you know, it's a breakfasty dish, it's a lunch dish, it's a dinner dish, it's whatever you want it to be. And it's nice that it's so fluid. Yeah. Thanks for joining. I'm still gonna pull mine out, so let's stay on record if that's okay. Got lots of compost for the chickens today. And I'm gonna show you the sauce that I love with this. A little heat up some sofrito or have some roasted garlic aioli. I think I've mentioned this in a class before, but I bought this one, but homemade aioli is amazing. And a really easy way to make roasted garlic aioli is just put some frying oil in a pan, throw in some garlic cloves that still have their skins on, cook them for a minute or two until they start to brown, and then pull them out, stick them in a blender, remove the skins first, of course, add some salt and pepper, and then some lemon juice and blend it up with mayonnaise, and it's just out of this world. So that would go really nice drizzled on top of this. I'm gonna peek. Almost there. Oh my God, it smells so good. I'm so excited. I'm getting mine a little bit crispy on the top because that's how I want it. And you should have enough salad greens left over that you can make a nice little vinaigrette with that salad if you'd like to, and serve it with your beautiful tortilla. Okay, I'm gonna leave it in one more minute. I just want to want to let people go, but I also want to show it because it's so beautiful with all those colors. And it's really a pleasure to be able to get local greens and feature them in a dish with summer and well, spring and summer coming. I'm just absolutely thrilled that the ground is waking up and these classes are going to have a lot more vegetables to feature, a lot more diversity of vegetables rather. Speaking of, we do send a feedback form, sort of really quick survey. If folks who attended tonight would, or even watched the video, you could write to us to get one of those survey copies. It's really appreciated. Those are how we pick recipes for the following week or month, and it just getting that feedback's really helpful for us. So we know how to offer a better class that's like more exciting for people or goes through directions in a clearer manner or focuses on a topic or a recipe that you want to learn about. So please do fill those out if you get them emailed to you. And folks watching on YouTube can send us an email to receive that. Okay, I'm going to pull it out now. Now these could absolutely be stored in the fridge. You can cut it into pieces, bring it for lunches. It's just stunning. I cannot wait to eat this. I'm gonna cut it into some slices. Where's my camera? It's so hard to do this. There we go. Gorgeous. So in a minute, all this extra olive oil will fall to the bottom. I'll slice it up and it's good to go. Thank you, everybody. We're going to end the recording now.